Good afternoon to everyone. I'm Kalpana Vishwanath and I'm joining you from Delhi. This we are currently looking at the thematic dialogue around urban safety and security as part of the ASEAN Sustainable Urbanization Strategy, or ASUS, as has been discussed, which is primarily to identify the key priorities for ASEAN cities for sustainable urbanization. And among the several themes that have been identified as part of that strategy, security, safety, personal security, safety, the urban security is a key element that has been identified. And this thematic dialogue today will have speakers and a panel discussion to focus on this very important element of understanding how our cities function and how our cities they can be inclusive for everyone. The point of the strategy, the urbanization, sustainable urbanization strategy, has been to identify the trends, the urban trends in all of our cities, and to identify the priority areas that we need to address. Often, crime and security are not seen as very major problems in Asian cities, and they do not fall very high on many of the global indicators. But if we really look at safety and security as a very holistic process and as a very holistic understanding, which looks at inclusion as the way that we analyze security and safety, we will see that even our ASEAN cities fall short on many areas. One of the things that the strategy is doing is also to provide toolkits that city governments can use to in order to address these issues. When we talk about urban safety and security, we are not we're talking about a range of issues. We're talking about, of course, freedom from crime and violence, but we're also looking at the digital space, and the digital space is an important one from both elements. It is a way to address security and safety. It can be a tool, it can be an aid, but we also know that the digital space itself can lead to violence and crime. And therefore, when we talk about security and we bring in the urban, we begin safety, security, and we begin the digital elements, we need to recognize that it is increasing and improving the standard of living, as well as what we are nowadays, a lot of people are talking about of the notion of urban well-being, as well-being as something that goes beyond just a more simplistic understanding of either good health or safety, but personal safety that looks at issues of crime, of course, natural disasters, of course, other global problems like terrorism, but also the issues that come due to poverty, due to lack of good housing arrangements, lack of social security for the most vulnerable in our cities. And I think that's something that we have recognized, that when we look at safety and security, we must look at the most vulnerable in our cities. And the most vulnerable would include a range of people, from people living in low income neighborhoods and slums, but also migrant workers, but also children, women, uh, people who are disabled. And therefore, when we want a more inclusive approach, we should be looking at having that. So, the objective of this session is really to share knowledge and increase awareness on the challenges as well as the opportunities for ASEAN cities to enhance urban security and safety. So it's not just, it's a broader version of safety and security. And the discussion will be with local government representatives as well as experts in the area across the region, looking at urban safety and security, to take advantage of relevant digital technologies. So the way that the structure is going to be taking place today is that we will have a speaker, which is going to be Dr. Vichai Kanchanasuwan, who is the Deputy Mayor of Hat Yai City Municipality in Thailand. He will deliver a short presentation, and that will be followed by a panel discussion with three others who will be joining us on the panel. That's Mr. Rama Raditya, who is the founder and CEO of Clue from Indonesia, Miss Catherine Anila, who is the founder of Vanguards for Change, as well as Dr. Nicole Kahn, who is the director of XYX Lab and an associate professor at Monash University. So we will begin this session, and I invite Dr. Vichai to make his presentation, which will kick off the panel discussion that we will take forward now. Over to you, Dr. Vichai. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon, Chairman and distinguished guests. I am Vichai Kanchanasuwan, Deputy Mayor of Hat Yai City Municipality. Today, I feel good when to present about Hat Yai safety and security, enhanced safety and security in city. I would like to explain Hat Yai City Municipality, the city context. Maybe move the slide of the next to the city context. Hat Yai have a population about 158, 392. But when we talk about Hat Yai city, the greater Hat Yai about 300,000 population. The area only in the municipality about 20 kilometers. But if we include for the greater Hat Yai about 100 kilometers square, Hat Yai located in Songkhla province in southern Thailand, the third most populated municipality in the country, the biggest in the south. Hat Yai is a southern hub of transportation, logistics, commerce, including work and education. We have 3 or 4 universities in Hat Yai. The city context, we have the problem of crime. It's higher than the average of the country. Songkhla, when we talk Hat Yai in Songkhla province, has about 155 crime per 100,000 population. When compared to the nation average, only about 110. The top 3 crime in Hat Yai, thief, the first one, the second one drug, and the last one robbery. The women and children sometimes become the victim of the crime. That's one problem that we would like to solve by use digital or AI CCTV. We are being affected by southern border insurgent in the adjoining province. In between 2005 to 2014, we have a 6 insurgency-related attempt and 13 people dead and more than 100 injured in Hat Yai during at that time. And another problem we face and we worry every year about flooding in Hat Yai. We have an economic loss from the flooding in 2000. This one I would like to call it, a billion is correctly, 1,400 million US dollar in 2000. And 2010, we lost about 100 million baht. So the people in Hat Yai, when at that time about October, November, and December, we worried a lot about the flooding in Hat Yai. So we hope about AI CCTV maybe can help or to reduce to awareness to solve the flooding too. It challenge to the project, Nick, because if we lot of economic, especially at the time the problem of COVID-19, we depend on the tourism. So when we have the problem of flooding and security too, sometimes we try to solve our problem. However, to improve the efficiency and safety, we try to take a full advantage of public safety technology and artificial intelligence. We think about CCTV, artificial intelligence, and try to have a single command center to solve the problem on time. At the same time, we maybe please, Nick, we try to maximize utilization of CCTV technology to other cities because Hat Yai we compose close to about 4 or 5 municipalities around Hat Yai and make Hat Yai to be a safe place for our citizens and tourists. Project overview for the next slide. Project overview. The key component is digital safety and security management strategy. Hat Yai digital safety and security strategy. Enhancement of awareness on digital literacy and digital rights by training the program. Coverage expansion. Increase number of CCTV. Right now we have 721. We try to increase double to 1,503. Surveillance efficiency improvement by introduce of AI artificial CCTV and try to have a single command center and utilize data analytics system. Next slide. Project overview. We have the existing. Right now we have a 721. Some are analog, is out of date. We have about 50% is okay. I mean for the CCTV right now. So we run this program to improve our CCTV, and we try to upgrade the former one that have need to be fixed someone, and have a new installation for the analog 532 and have new installation AI CCTV 250, and we have a single command center. The project overview have a data infrastructure, a command and control layer, data management layer, data aggregation and analytic layer, data acquisition layer. We try to use big data to help to solve a particular problem. To implementation the project, holistic safety management, we focus on next step, like focus on identification of root cause. We know we have some the problem of unemployment and underlying socio-economic inequality. We try to promote of social coherence. In the last 5 years, the poor in the city, because some people in the countryside moved to the country in the city. So we try to help them too. We try to coupling safety intervention with physical improvement, and at the same time try to delivering and integrate solution by connect to ongoing initiative. To implement, we know we need uh, to cooperate and to discuss each agency. We to integrate between at least 6-7 agency. The first one, the police, because the police have some particular AI CCTV, the army, the transport office, irrigation office related to the flood management, national agency, local network. We invite them to become the committee and discuss the issue, how to cooperate and try to utilize CCTV to maximize or to best benefit for the people in Hat Yai. Next slide. The to implementation, the data governance, we have the privacy. According to the government, in the last 2 years, we have a privacy act related to the data security. So we try to follow the national act related to the privacy issue. At the same time, we need to sharing data with another agency. So this one is challenge ourselves to work with another agency. I would like to hear maybe the panel discussion or the recommendation from other city that plan to present the AI CCTV to make the city to be safe and security. When we talk about a safe city, sometimes we think only the problem of crime, but in fact, the national such as flooding, one of the problem in Hat Yai. So we think AICCB can help us too. Thank you very much for attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vichai. I think you really brought the issues in its entirety. You know, there is the CCTV camera, there is technology, the idea of a command center, but as well as we have to understand the root causes, the fact that there is inequalities and the need for social cohesion, but also issues like floods and natural disasters and climate change are having impact on the way that people perceive their security. We will now actually have a broader panel discussion to take up some of these issues of what is a safe city? What does security mean? How can digital technologies play an important role in all this? And how do we involve multi-stakeholders? I think Dr. Vichai, in his second last slide, brought up a very good point that you have the municipality, you have the smart city, you have the police, but you also have the community and NGOs. And unless everyone works together, even the benefits of technology sometimes can be can be sort of enhanced when we have more integration. So I would like to invite the panel now. So Dr. Vichai will be there, Mr. Rama Raditya from CLUE, Ms. Catherine from Vanguards for Change, and Dr. Nicole Kalms from Monash University. So welcome to all of you to this panel. I am going to, ask you one more question, Dr. Vichai, before we open up to the panel. Hat Yai has a vision to become a sustainable city. And how does this project on security link and further support that vision that you have as a city?
Thank you very much. We discussed a lot about sustainable development. We have 103 communities in Hat Yai municipality. uh, and each community I mean the executive and the officer of Hajj municipality come to talk with them to solve many problems, just as a solid waste one of the problem in the community. And when they have the COVID, the the security for the human being, I think is really important. So we try to help them at the time of the crisis. At the same time, we try to talk with them and what that encourage them. Everyone need to responsibility to the city. The city at, not responsibility by the mayor or the deputy mayor, but the people in the community. Everyone must play an important role. So we hope after COVID, we will have the council, each community. We have a 103, the small community in Hajj municipality. So when we talk about safety, uh, we think the people must play an important and need to understand how together, not just only the police or the public official. But we think AI CCTV, it can help us when have the problem. We can solve the problem immediately. It can save time. We try to use technology to help us. But the center, I think the people in the community must be very important person. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Vichai. I'm going to go next to Dr. Nicole. Dr. Vichai has spoken about technologies as well as multi-stakeholders. How do you think that technologies that are currently used to apply on urban safety and the data that is collected, and CCTVs is one form of data, but there is other data that's collected. Can this be used to inform other sectors in cities, such as urban planning? How do we build more livable cities? How do we address urban well-being? And do you have any interesting examples maybe you could share with us on that? Over to you, Nicole.
Thank you for that question. Look, I think that one of the key forms of technology that we've been using at the XYX lab is crowd mapping. And in particular, we're really interested in how that kind of technology can contribute to urban safety and a form of data collection, particularly for women and girls. So our position is really that we really, as designers and architects and urban planners, shouldn't be making assumptions about what's happening for women in particular in city places. And so really relying on them contributing their lived experiences through crowd mapping is a key part of that research. And I think the example that I'd like to share is just a very recent project. It's the fourth crowd mapping project we've done, but it's called Your Ground. And it's really about trying to uncover what's happening for women and girls, but also gender diverse people in particularly recreational spaces in light of COVID, where we've really relied on these recreational spaces as places of refuge and exercise, etc. And there's been a lot of inequity around those spaces. This tool has really sought to think about accessibility for local communities. And it was a partnership with local government. So, they were part of kind of the outreach and also a financial model that I think made it quite accessible for local government as well. And that really relies on that sense of a co-design kind of practice. So wanting to kind of generate the data with the people that will presumably benefit from the work that we do, which I think is a really core part of what we are kind of aiming at the XYX lab.
Thank you, Nicole. I mean, I completely agree with you. I mean, Safety Pin, the organization that I'm part of, we really do work exactly on the same thing, looking at, and I think it's important, interesting, it's coming out that, it's technology, but it's also the community. It's also people who are looking at it. So I'm going to ask Mr. Rama, because you are a part of a technology company. So you have, but when you have limited public infrastructure, it makes it difficult for cities sometimes to implement the hardware, the software, in order to actually have some of these solutions where the technology actually reaches everybody. So maybe you could share a little bit about the work that you're doing, as well as some interesting examples of how it's actually had an impact.
All right. Thank you very much for the questions. Again, Dr. Wichai, thank you for the presentations. It was very interesting. The way we see it, that there are a lot of similar cities in Indonesia that reflects to cities in Thailand, because it has similar landscape. We have implemented in more than 100 cities, smart cities in Indonesia, from the capital city Jakarta, from the medium-sized city, or the smaller ones in rural areas. So we have some experiences regarding lack of infrastructures, lack of education regarding the technology itself, and so on. So regarding the infrastructure itself, the way we see it, a lot of this conversation is about AI CCTVs, right? And AI CCTVs, also there are two options. It's either on the edge or on the cloud. If it's infrastructure issues, obviously AI surveillance solutions on cloud would be a challenge. So I would recommend probably more on the edge-based CCTV or edge-based cameras. But like our solutions, we provide a very distinguished compression engine where we can allow cloud processing or streaming processing from the CCTVs would be very light, like 1 to 100 to the existing size. And another thing is the way we see it on the field. Yeah, some of the cities that really cannot use like AI CCTVs and really have like lack of infrastructures, we utilize these people. So there is one city in Indonesia. It's a very small city. We cannot implement any AI CCTV that we have. Usually we implement a lot of like anomaly detection, suspicious objects, suspicious people, right? Facial recognition and so on. But this cannot be done. So in the first phase of it, we empower the people with a citizen participation app for them to report any kind of issue. So at that time, the issues was about flood, and every year the city is always got wiped out with flood, and the National Disaster Agencies is always working very hard every year to actually rebuild the city and so on. So the whole city, like about 40,000 populations, they're reporting clogged sewers, they're reporting areas that is already flooded. Usually it's all flooded, and potential floods and so on. During the rainy season, the next rainy season, those floods is tremendously reduced. So it's actually the citizens' participations that really helps, because I understand that smart city is all about the technology, but at the end of the day, it's for the people, right? And how the people can actually rebuild, not rebuild, but participate on changing their mindset to participate on building their own city. So that's just some experience that we had in the past. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's very telling and important that even sitting in a technology company, you recognize that technology on its own is never the solution. It's an enabler. It's when you work with it. So, Catherine, you are now a generation where the digital technology, the way digital is going to shape things in a way that I think many of us are even unaware of how it's going to happen, because it kind of changes. CCTV, now we have the AI CCTVs, we have facial recognition, but we also have a lot of worries about these technologies, And I think as a young person, what can be done to ensure that the tools are made friendly to everyone. There's more awareness, but also to highlight the risks related to this very rapid digital transformation that's taking place in our world. So, Catherine, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kalpana. And also thank you, Dr. Vichai, for your very holistic presentation earlier. Um, what I really like about everything that we've discussed um, right here is that there is so much focus on the community and the people. And that is essentially what I champion among children and youth as well. That is because exactly like how Ms. Kalpana pointed out, there is no escaping technology. Even this forum happening right now, it can only happen because of the existence of technology. And that is why it is so important for our generation, for the children and the youth to have digital resilience. And this resilience, it needs to start from young. Even a baby that's not even a year old has already been exposed to technology in various ways. For example, when a toddler, a baby is sleeping, you put a baby cam right beside the toddler. That is technology. And as parents who use this technology, these parents need to be aware of the do's and don'ts, of the privacy and whatever that comes along with having to use digital technology for their children. Now, when it comes to what we as a community can do, I think all segments of society are responsible in ensuring that digital awareness and resilience is around, is where we, children, youth, and all stakeholders have this awareness and resilience. But mainly, I feel like the governments and the non governmental organizations, along with government agencies, play a very vital role in making sure this happens. And when all that happens, the young adults will follow suit. When it comes to the government, I think that to what is so essential right now is to include digital resilience in the education syllabus. Now, gone are the years where we learn how to use Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel when we enter university. That that is so 10, 15 years ago. Right? I feel like today's syllabus, it should not just include ICT and the technicalities of digital devices, but it should also help the young generation, help us understand the digital ethics, such as the do's and don'ts of social media, what privacy actually is, and whether privacy, when you use social media or when you use a digital device, how to also think of the privacy of your friends and your family members, and so on. Apart from that, I feel like governments also need to make sure that no segment of society is left behind. With the pandemic happening and having to transition from our usual way of life to online learning and online working, it has shown us the disparity between those of us who have access to internet and digital technology and the many, many people who do not. And I feel like we all need to move together as a nation or as ASEAN, we all need to move together. And non governmental organizations or CSOs like mine who focus on children's rights should also start creating awareness and empowering children and the youth in understanding our rights in terms of the digital world. It's time for us to look at it in a more holistic perspective where we can no longer separate offline and online because everything around us has already been digitalized and there's only going to be more digitalization, no going back. And so we need to understand our rights in terms of access to information, in terms of privacy, and also in terms of freedom of expression and how we exercise all of these rights responsibly. And another stakeholder of society that I'd like to touch on before I end is the community bodies. For example, here in Malaysia, we have in every locality, in every neighborhood, we have a, a body called the Rukun Tetangga. And these are like the chairperson and a group of people who represent their neighborhood. And these group of people sort of are the voice for this small neighborhood. And what these people can do is they hold the power to educate and empower not just the young people, but their entire community at the very grassroots level of being in the neighborhood. And that essentially is actually how, in my district, for example, how we have approached the city council, the municipal council, and have reached out to them and asked them to implement the child-friendly cities initiative and also the smart cities initiative in two of the districts actually. And it started because we started training young people, children below the age of 18, to become empowered child advocates who are willing to spearhead this initiative. So I feel like when all of these are structurally put in place, then the young people, all of us, will follow suit. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that was an extremely comprehensive answer. And I think some of the issues that you have raised are things that I'm sure many of the panelists are also thinking about. I really like the idea of digital resilience. I think it's true for many of us to understand um, things are moving so fast that we, even when you talk about ethics, what was a digital ethics 2 years ago may not apply in the same way today. And therefore, I think the concept of resilience is a good one to move forward with. But I also think that you brought this up, the issue of the digital divide. And this digital divide is based on many things. For example, in some countries, in India, for example, the digital divide is a very big gender divide. It's nearly 70% difference between of the possession of a smartphone between men and women. It may be something else in some of your countries. It could be certainly poverty. It could be lack of access to data plans which allow you to use it. And and I think, Nicole, the point you brought up is that as well as Rama, that how do you get the perspectives of citizens? And I'm going to put this question, open it to all of you. You've all said that it's important to have citizens' voices. Now, this could be in some cases like what you've tried to do, Nicole, is to try and get women to talk about their experience through an app or through other this thing. But in the context of digital divide, how do we ensure that there is a diversity at the table when we're making decisions about well-being and security, right? You don't want the community or young people or women or other genders to come later, what we're saying. And I really appreciate Dr. Vichai as the deputy mayor saying that it's important to have people's voices right at the beginning through the entire process. It's no longer that seen as a top-down exercise, the process of city building and urbanization. And therefore, I'm going to really open it to all of you to give your perspective on this in this thing, on the kind of issues that you all have actually thrown up, I think, which is an extremely deep discussion. So over to you, whoever would like to could begin by answering and giving their perspective on some of these issues. Nicole, would you like to go? Yeah.
Sure. I didn't want to jump in before somebody else, but I have so many thoughts around this particular issue. And I think one of the interesting things to talk about is part of what happens when you build a project like a crowd mapping project that you want people to engage with. You need to talk about it very positively. You need to kind of talk about the benefits of it. But actually, we're super aware of the limitations. So the digital divide is one of the huge limitations, which we have to write about when we write our reports, to talk very carefully about who is excluded from this research, because there always is somebody. In Australia, where I'm located, often it can be about age, but also in this recent project, we translated the communications about the project into 7 different languages, but we missed a whole lot of people who will not have participated in this project, and it is problematic. So I really think this is something worthwhile talking about. I do think that we are also under a bit of a false pretense some ways about digital technology, in that there's a lot of public reckoning occurring around the ways that particularly women are sharing ideas about gendered violence, whether it's through Twitter and all the different kind of social media campaigns. But we have to remember that they are platforms that have been built and continue to be run by men. And so there's already this kind of umbrella of not just patriarchy, but often misogynism. And how do we operate freely when we're using these technologies that are kind of sitting within that framework, I think is a very interesting question. Is it possible to have a feminist methodology within that? And I think also the users themselves are raising issues about privacy. So, 4 years ago when we first did this work, people were like, great, what a great tool. And now the users are saying, but what are you doing with my data? How, what happens when I share my concern? Who is going to use this? Is it useful? They want us to be accountable. So it's not a perfect method. And it's an absolutely important and indeed riveting conversation, I think.
Yeah, thank you. I think the issue of privacy, data, who has the right to which data, is something that's really concerning all of us. So, Rama, as a technology person here, maybe you could share some of the thoughts that people in the tech sector are looking at, because it's really incumbent upon you now to come up with new ways of protecting privacy.
Right. So yeah, thank you for the questions. So based on our experience in Jakarta City, so the smart city initiative that we launched in the first time in the beginning was a citizen participation app, where everybody is allowed to download an app, the app, Clue app, in order to report any kind of problems in the city, right? And we have about 1 million downloads, 1.5 million downloads, and so on. Every day we receive about 40,000 reports. But these reports can be very wild, right? They can report about people's houses, stuff like this. And eventually, in the very beginning, the government, it became quite an issue because it's really invading of people's privacy, right? And the government in the very beginning did not make any regulation about it, and we had to do it together with the government during the process of launching this app or operating this app altogether. So the regulations, I believe, has to be a transparency communicate, as well as communicate with all the sectors within the city. Like explained in Malaysia, there is rukun tetangga, right? In Jakarta, I mean in Indonesia, there is also neighborhood heads, like rukun tetangga, where we have to communicate all these kind of things before we launch the app, alongside with the implications regarding the data privacy. And we had to do that after it quite late, but eventually people started to accept that. We had to readjust the applications, how to report, make it anonymous, how to protect the data, and communicate to the citizens that your data is safe. All the data is encrypted in the data center, stuff like that. And then we launched the AI CCTV, right, where the AI is aiming at everybody for facial recognitions, vehicle detections, license plate recognition, and so on. But we already learned from that experience where, the citizens have the rights to know that their privacy is safe. We are doing this for what purpose, stuff like that, for their safety and security, for the sake of their safety and security. I think so. Communications and transparency is key in this case. But again, in terms of the technology, of course, we have to protect the data, as safe as possible. So centralized data centers, all encrypted data, as I said, and the government has to communicate that to the citizens, as well as in terms of, in the form of regulations and policies. So I think that's my take regarding the data privacy.
Thank you, Rama. I will ask you, Dr. Vichai, being in local government, what are the challenges of actually making it inclusive? What are the challenges of getting citizen participation? Because it's a very nice word to say, but I'm sure sitting where you are, sometimes it's not that easy.
Thank you, Governor. I would like to mention about the protect the data for the citizen that Lama talking. I think we careful about this issue. At the same time, when we talk about the empowerment for the women and for the youth, I think this one is inclusive. The municipality we need to hearing, or sometimes we call social listening from the social media, the right Facebook, just analyze Facebook, and we know that for the poor sometimes we have the gap, the digital gap. So we run one program for the Hat Yai city. We call it free Wi-Fi for the poor in the community. That's we think we set up the program, and next year we will run this program to help reduce the cost for the poor to access to the digital era. So for the women and the youth in Hat Yai, we know that Thai women play very important role to develop the city. Many in the market, for example, the people who sell and buy in the market, most of them in Thailand, the women play a very important role. So we try the best that we can to hearing what they think, what they want, what they demand from the municipality to help them or to solve their own problem. Uh, right now, when we face the problem of COVID, our children cannot go to school. We need to online study. We have 7,000 students in our municipality, in Hat Yai municipality, 6 schools. And when I have a survey, we have a survey, the questionnaire ask the father and mother who have a kid learn in the school, and what they think about online study. About 30 and 40% say no, it's not good. It's not good for our student. So we think how to solve that. One, the problem, they think they don't have the smartphone because the cost is expensive. They don't have an iPad. That's one we know our municipality not have enough money to support them. But we have a free food for the student. Our student, everyone have a free food about 20 baht per one student. Not too much, but help them. So we return that money to the parents. So if they can save for the food, and maybe can buy a smartphone to help them. So I think to empower for the women and youth very important factor to develop our municipality or to develop the city in terms of long-term sustainable development. Need to ask them to feel that have a sense of belonging. I would like to say, try to ask them. They need to feel the city is belong to them, to themselves, not for the old man or something like that. I would like to say. So sometimes we think about the e-sport to bring the student who play the game or something like that to compete in the e-sport. Next year we try to think about this program too. And another one that's we try utilize the big data in terms of to hearing or listening to the social media, because sometimes we don't know what they talk. Sometimes when they talk in the social media, we would like to know what they think about their future, and if we can help them. I think our mayor, he said we need to help them because the future belong to the young person. One thing I think we share the similar problem. No matter in Malaysia, Indonesia, in Thailand, the people in the city, I think not, the standard of living is not high. In Hajai, about 50% is still the poor people. So we try to fill this gap. And if we have any idea, we can sharing from one city to another city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I do want to give an opportunity. I know there is an audience, there are many people listening. You can put your comments and questions into the comment section, and we will certainly get the panelists to try and answer them. I don't know if there are already any questions. Maybe some of the organizers can let me know if there's anything that's come from the audience yet. I think we have one more panelist actually who has joined us a little late, and I'm going to ask Ms. Malvika Jayaraman to join us. Thank you for joining us. She is the Executive Director of the Digital Rights Hub. And I think you've come at the right time. You've actually, I don't know if you've been hearing the conversations, but really we've been talking about a range of issues on the digital divide, on the ethics, on digital resilience, on data privacy. So I am going to ask you, give you a few minutes to really, from your perspective and the work that you've been doing, how do you ensure digital rights for especially the most vulnerable communities, whether it's in any city? How do you look at privacy and rights in both the collection, application of data? We've been talking about AI, but we also hear a lot about the biases of AI. So if you could sort of, give us a few of your thoughts on some of these issues in the next few minutes.
Thank you. Thank you. And I really enjoyed listening to everyone else. Thanks so much. I think from my perspective, we need to really underline that digital rights are human rights. I think people often forget. They act like they're a separate category, that they don't fall within the framework of the existing UN system or all of the human rights that have been fought for so long. And I think people also think there are so many stereotypes in this space, like Asians don't care about privacy or Indians or Chinese don't care about privacy because it's a more communitarian, collective kind of consciousness. And I think that's really dangerous because everyone has something that they need to be private about. And I think one of the sort of ideas that has done a lot of disservice in this space is this idea that if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear.
Yeah.
And I think that's been extremely dangerous because the fact that you haven't done anything illegal doesn't mean you're not non-conforming in some way, or it doesn't, at a very blunt level, it doesn't mean that it's anyone else's business. And I think women and marginalized groups in particular are always vulnerable because people assume they have a right to their bodies, a right to their space, a right to invade them without permission. Consent is always a really, really big issue when it comes to vulnerable populations. And I think when it comes to something like data and privacy, there is this assumption that consent is sort of a get out of jail free card. You click through all these terms and conditions and you're home free, and it doesn't really matter what's happening in the system. And I think, like with so many other technologies, those that aim to provide, security and other kinds of solutions, especially at the city level, it's always a case of technology is the solution without really asking, what's the problem? What is the problem that we're trying to solve? And I think when countries and cities are in a real haste to implement AI-driven or technology solutions or whatever the next cool thing is, without participatory design processes, without it being a bottoms-up approach, without really asking the end user what they need, where they feel insecure, how the tool can help them rather than surveilling them in ways that are really creepy and dysfunctional, I think that's really problematic. And I think if you were to ask women what they need, they might need streetlights, or they might need the men to be educated. Jasmine Pateja, who runs Blank Noise in India, does these wonderful art projects to highlight this idea of how women's spaces are always, questionable. She does this campaign on the right to loiter, If women just sit around in the town square, it's assumed they're touting for business rather than just getting a break from work or from being at home or having family responsibilities. Women aren't allowed to be in a space without purpose. And I think, that kind of spatial reality is something that makes them particularly vulnerable to surveillance at city scale, whether it's CCTV cameras or other kinds of tracking applications. And I think for them, often the most insecure space is the home, where they might have domestic violence, they might have other kinds of issues, and being in public might offer them the most security that they have, to be surrounded by other people. Yet I think the idea is that a woman's place is in the home, or a vulnerable person should stay at home where they can be adequately protected, without asking if that's where they feel safe and what their conditions of precarity are. So I think with a lot of digital technologies, we don't stop to ask about the socio-political, economic, cultural context, which might make these conditions of precarity even worse. So I think, this idea that you educate the end user about their privacy rights, that's actually asking the most vulnerable in the chain to do even more work to protect themselves. You're asking them to do the training, you're asking them to navigate settings on their phone, which they might not have the digital literacy to even understand. And I think that's why privacy by design is really important, because it's done at the scale of the platform. You're creating defaults where the setting is, private by default, and people can then opt in to particular solutions that allow tracking and surveillance. And when you do that at the scale of the platform, that's a very deliberate design decision. It's an architectural choice which can actually affect structural realities much more than expecting every single individual to sit and, get a PhD in how to change the settings on your phone. And I think the last thing I'll just say is, often in these kinds of, very techno-utopian scenarios that are aiming for security, people are seen as the problem to be managed, or the sort of footprint to be erased, to have a really clean data set or a really clean technological solution that always works. And people are the things to be eliminated because they cause friction or they behave in unpredictable ways. And I think when you actually design, I think as Nicole and others were saying, when you make women part of the process of design and don't treat them as a target or a recipient of largesse, but a very equal participant with agency, not a passive recipient of technology that somebody else designed in Silicon Valley, or a bunch of men who don't have these particular conditions and they don't understand or will never be in those shoes. I think when you're very sensitive about these design choices, you actually end up with solutions that work for the people that they're meant to serve. So I think I'll just stop there and see if anyone else has questions.
Yeah. So we don't really have much time left, but there's one question that has come up, which is really about how do you ensure data safety and information under the QR code, especially in the context of digital payments. So I don't know if anyone would like to have a quick go at answering that question, because I think there's so much today, especially in the context of COVID, where we've not been able to step out for so many months. I think people are worried. So Rama, would you have something to say, or Malvika, about this data information under the QR codes? But really a quick answer in half a minute.
Yeah, I think technically it's encryption. Is a very secure encryption would protect the data that is produced when we do like QR payment at scale, and all of the data has to be centralized somewhere where, like I said again, the data center has to be centralized, whether it is in government or whether it is in enterprise, somewhere that is transparent for the public use. But in terms of the data flow itself, I think I believe it's the encryptions of the technology, or of the transactions itself.
Thank you, Rama. We really have only less than a minute to wind up this I think an extremely rich session, and I'm not going to even try and summarize it, But I do think some of the key words that came out to me on this was the digital rights are human rights, that we need digital resilience, which Catherine spoke about. I think that's extremely important. A consent as part of it, and a bottom-up approach, really in the context of today. I think when, as citizens, as users, many of us are fearful because of the of issues of privacy, of issues of where is our data being used. We don't, like you said, Malvika, the default settings are not ones that protect our privacy. And it is the big tech companies. Now you have your, the big tech companies talking about, and, if all are, for example, 3 days ago, there was a 4-hour outage of some of the main sort of social media. How are we going to, plan our lives in the context where now it's not even governments who are controlling? So even so, Dr. Vichai, as government, but the point is, if the entire technology platforms collapse at some point, or they change rules deciding on what suits them, who is going to make those changes? And I think, therefore, the UN system is actually a very important one to monitor some of this. And I do think the idea of digital resilience and digital rights as human rights must be enshrined even in our SDGs. It's not a public good in itself. And I always like to say, and I'll end with that, technology can only be an enabler. Technology in itself cannot be a solution. And as you said, for example, the CCTV cameras, the moment you have, we found in one situation in India that CCTV cameras in metro stations were being viewed by some of the men in the Delhi metro to actually watch people, because a lot of young couples use the metro station as a place for romance. You don't have too many places for romance, so it also becomes a way of moral policing. So I think technology can be wonderful. It has made this possible. It has made us be able to survive through COVID in so many ways, and there's no doubt about that. But as Dr. Vichai talked about, if 40% of the people do not have access to a smartphone, what has happened to the education? The inequality in our education status has become so much more deeper in this past 1.5 years. A study in India has shown that I think some 70% of students have actually lost out a whole year of education because they did not have the access to the smartphone. So, and it's good that technology companies are recognizing this, but all of us as citizens and local governments and the UN, I think we have to continue putting those questions to technology companies so that nobody becomes overpowerful, and the resilience to change technology when it's needed to respond to the needs of, I would say, and I would really end with what Catherine said. This is the generation whose lives are completely going to be determined by the changes in technology. So they must have a lot more say in it. So all our earlier hierarchies need to be challenged today. That, do older people know more than young people? I realize that's not true anymore. That's how we grow up thinking, but that has changed. So I would really like to end by thanking this extremely rich discussion. Thank you, Dr. Vichai, for your wonderful presentation of Hatyai City. It was really wonderful to hear that. I have actually lived quite a few years of my life in Thailand, so it was really nice to hear about that. Rama, and I think Indonesia is a very important one because you have very high penetration of smartphone usage. And I remember when Safety Pin came to Indonesia, we had really a very wide usage. I think we met someone from Clue, in fact. Catherine, thank you for bringing out, I think, very crucial issues. Nicole and Malvika, both to you as well, to bring out the issues of ethics, of participation, of diversity as central to the way we, as cities, learn to use technology. Thank you so much for being part of this, and I really enjoyed. I learned a lot from this. Thank you to the audience as well.
Thank you, Emma.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.